Softsadness, How Openness Feels, a book by John Ferdinand. This book is a work of personal reflection, art, and philosophy. It is written from lived experience and interpretation. Some names, identifying details and circumstances, have been altered to protect privacy. It describes one writer's experience and offers language for a feeling many people share. It is not a treatment, a therapy, or a substitute for professional care. The practice described in these pages is not intended for and should not be used in place of treatment for depression, anxiety, disorders, trauma, or any other medical or psychological condition. If you're experiencing persistent low mood, hopelessness, thoughts of harming yourself, or other symptoms of mental illness, please seek help from a qualified professional. Quotations from Marcus Aurelius, John of the Cross, Brother Lawrence, and the Cloud of the Unknowing are the author's own renderings based on public domain translations, freely modernized. For the one who keeps arriving and arriving again. Opening. The thing itself. Something happens. A message you sent goes unanswered. A friend pauses a half second too long before replying. You walk into a room and someone you expected to smile does not. A doctor says, "Let's talk for a moment." The phone lights up with a name you were not ready to see. For an instant, so short you almost never catch it. Nothing has been decided. The message is just unanswered. The pause is just a pause. The face is just a face. Nothing has been added yet. And then, faster than you thought, something moves. They are angry with me. I said the wrong thing. It's happening again. Something is wrong. A meaning arrives and clicks into place, and the click is so quick and so quiet that you do not experience it as a meaning at all. You experience it as seeing. You do not think, "I have decided what this is." You think, "This is what is happening." That small movement, that one that turns something open into something settled, is the subject of this book. I want to be careful here because it is easy to mishear. I am not talking about anxiety or overthinking or any of the loud things. Those come later, downstream, once the movement has already happened. I am talking about something earlier and much quieter. The instant before the worry, where the thing that happened is still just the thing that happened, and you have not yet closed your hand around it. There is a gap there, a small open space between what happens and what you make of it. Most of us live our whole lives without ever standing in it because we cross it too fast to notice it was there. We are already on the other side, inside the meaning, inside the story, inside the version of events that feels like simple fact. Before we knew, there was a side to be on. This is not a flaw. It is not a thing to fix. The closing is useful. It is most of how we function, and you would not want to lose it. A person who could not close the gap could not cross a street. The point of this book is not to stop closing. It is much smaller and much stranger than that. It is only this, that there is a gap, that you are almost never in it, and that something is lost each time you leave it, a kind of contact, a directness, a nearness to your own life, that the meaning, however true, stands slightly in front of. And there is one more thing, which took me longest to see, and is the most useful thing in this book. The leaving is not random. When the gap opens and we cannot bear it, we reach instantly, automatically, for whatever will close it. Sometimes that is an explanation. Sometimes it is a feeling, a verdict, a story about who to blame. Sometimes it is being right. Sometimes it is being wronged. It does not matter which. What the mind reaches for is not the true thing or the good thing, it is the closing thing, whatever is nearest to hand that will give the open moment a shape and let us stand on it. We do not choose certainty because it is true. We choose it because it is certain. And we will take a painful certainty over an open uncertainty almost every time, because at least the painful one is somewhere to stand. Once you see that you are not reaching for truth but for closure, and that the two are not the same, you start to catch yourself in the act. Not always, not even often, but sometimes. In the half second before the hand closes, you notice it closing. And that noticing is the first of the two things this book has to offer. The second is a practice, the only one I have ever trusted, and it comes late on purpose. Given to you now, you would only use it to leave. I have spent a long time near this. Longer than I meant to. I did not come to it as a student of anything. I came to it because my life broke open in ways I did not choose. And in the wreckage, I kept finding myself in this strange, stripped, open place where nothing was decided yet. And I wanted more than almost anything to get out of it. I tried to think my way out of it. I tried to feel my way out of it. I tried for a while to become spiritual enough to deserve my way out of it. None of it worked, because the trying was itself the leaving, and the place I was trying to escape was the only place anything real was happening. When I finally stopped trying to escape it, and went looking instead for anyone who had been here before me, anyone who could tell me what this place was, I found them. That is the strange thing, the thing that made me want to write this. People who never met, separated by oceans and centuries and languages, with no possible contact between them, kept describing the same narrow space and the same small movement away from it. A Roman emperor talking himself through a war, a monk in a French kitchen, an anonymous English contemplative who would not even sign his name, a Spanish friar in a cell, writing in the dark. They had different words: God, the present, the soul, the now, because words are all anyone has. But they were pointing, I am convinced, at one thing. The same thing I had been broken into. The same thing that opens in you in the half second before you decide what the unanswered message means. And I should tell you, before we begin, what this book is doing. Because it is doing two things, and only one of them is for you. It is my last book. I say that on the first pages rather than the final ones, because I want you to read everything that follows, knowing it. When this is finished, I am going away. Not from my life, from this. From the writing, the pointing, the standing slightly behind your shoulder, saying, look, where am I going? You cannot come. And I do not mean that as a mystery. The place is not a place. It is only what is left of a man when he runs out of things to defend. You will understand it fully by the end, but not before, and that is by design. Here is the confession that explains it. I used to try to save people. It was the kindest name I had for closing the gap, my gap. Someone near me would ache, and the ache would open something in me that I could not stand in, and the saving would close it. The helping was real, the love was real, and underneath both, a man was fleeing the open place by carrying other people out of theirs. The books I had written began as that, the most careful rescue I ever built. This one is built differently. It is built to make me unnecessary. Everything I know is in it. The one practice I trust is in it. And when you finish it, the only thing missing will be me. That is not a sad sentence. A pointing finger that stays forever becomes the thing people look at. So, the book, and then the going. It is to your advantage that I go away. By the last page, you will see why. One more thing about what you are holding. This book is art as much as it is anything, a translation of old texts and of one feeling into language made by a man near the end of his words. Translations are not prescriptions. Where I say sit, I am describing what I did, the way a poem describes a road. Take what you recognize, leave what you do not, and where I have drawn a line, there is one early on, and it matters. Take that exactly as written. So I am not your guide here. I am only one more person who ended up in this place and started writing down what I found. This book is an attempt to point at the one thing directly and let the others point alongside me, in their own voices, where they say it better than I can. I will not ask you to believe anything. I will only ask you to check as we go whether what is described is already happening in you. Because it is. And that is the wager of this book. Not that I will teach you something new, but that I will name something you have been doing and leaving and missing for as long as you have been alive. And that is in the naming you might, for a moment, not leave it quite so fast. I should say one last thing plainly before we begin, because almost everything written about this kind of moment promises the opposite. And I do not want you reading on under a false expectation. Nothing arrives. And if you stay in the open place, you are not rewarded with peace or presence or God as a warm feeling that finally answers the ache. The silence stays silent. I will return to this because it is the most important and most disappointing thing I know. And because the whole honesty of this book depends on my not pretending otherwise. What changes is not that something comes. What changes is that you stop leaving. Movement 1. The breaking. No one arrives here on purpose. The recognition does not come when you are looking for it. It comes when something gives way, when a certainty you are standing on is taken or simply stops holding, and for a while there is no floor. The first movement is about that giving way, and about the particular feeling that appears in the space it leaves. Soft sadness. There is a feeling that has been following you. It does not knock. It does not announce itself. It waits for the noise to thin, and then it is simply there. The way the temperature of a room is there. And you cannot say when it entered because it did not enter. It was underneath. I'm going to give it a name, and I want to say in advance that the name is a door held open, not a box closed. The feeling lives just before the place where language starts, and anything I call it will be slightly too solid for what it is. I call it soft sadness. You have been given other words for it. None of them were the right one. It is not grief. Grief has an object, a face, a date, a thing the world took. This has no object. Hold it up and look behind it. There is nothing it is about. It is not loneliness. Though loneliness is the first word your mind will reach for. Loneliness already tells a story. Someone should be here and is not. This tells no story. It was here before the story arrived to explain it. And it is not the other weight, the one that presses down and takes the colour out of things. I will draw that line carefully a few pages from now, because it must be drawn. This does not press. It does not darken. It is almost gentle. It is almost not sadness at all. Here is what it is. You have lived your whole life inside a covering. You built it the way everyone builds it, meaning by meaning, story by story, year by year, until the world could only reach you through it. This was not a mistake. A nerve cannot lie open in the weather. The covering let you cross streets and survive school and sit in meetings. It worked. But somewhere it began to wear thin. Perhaps something broke it open. Perhaps it simply finished its work and started quietly to come down. And in the thin places, the world began to touch you directly again, the way it touched you before you had words, and you felt it, and you did not know what you were feeling, and you reached for the oldest explanation a body has. It hurts. Something must be wrong. Listen to me. A nerve that has spent its whole life wrapped cannot tell the difference between being touched and being hurt. The first wind on an uncovered place feels like injury, even when it is only wind. This is soft sadness, not a wound, not a lack. The feel of the world arriving without the padding, the texture of being alive when nothing is covering it. It is how openness feels. I stood at a window once, an autumn evening, watching starlings move over the rooftops, hundreds of them, folding and turning as one body, settling towards the tree and then lifting again before they landed, unable, it seemed, to quite come to rest. Nothing was wrong. It was beautiful. And the feeling that rose in me watching it was this: soft, clear, with no grief in it, no story, no cause I could point to, just the bare fact of being there, at the window, alive, watching birds I would never see again wheel against a darkening sky. If you had asked me what was wrong, I would have had nothing to tell you. Nothing was wrong. Something was simply, finally, getting through. I was 8 years old the first time I tried to report it. I told my mother I had felt like crying for a week. She asked why, and I gave her the truest answer I've ever given anyone, before or since. I have no idea. Nothing had happened, nothing was missing. I noticed that the child got it right. No idea, no cause. It took me 30 years to describe it that well again. Because the man learned folders. Years later, I heard myself tell someone with the gravity of a confession, I am not made for happiness. There will always be this sadness in me. I have accepted it. I thought that was wisdom. And it was half of one. I was right that the feeling was permanent. I was wrong about everything else. I had filed the feeling under who I am, the deepest drawer there is, the one that never reopens on its own, and signed my name under the wrong word, and called the signing peace. The feeling never needed my acceptance. It needed my attention. The boy was closer to the truth than the man. He said, I have no idea, and stopped there. And that, though neither of us knew it, was the right answer. It's still the right answer. This book is only that answer, grown up. I have to be blunt now, once, because I am not going to pass this way again. I once wrote that this ache was a doorway, and that if you stayed, it would open into love. I was younger, and it was the truest thing I knew then. Later I wrote that nothing arrives. The silence stays silent. The ache stays an ache. And I hold to that, and will hold to it to the last page of this book. Here is the last thing, the one underneath both. Nothing arrives because nothing is missing. This feeling is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything. Everything at a nerve that was never built to be told so much. You are not standing at a door waiting. You are standing in the open, calling the weather loneliness. I will say it the way I would say it to one person, late, when the careful words have run out. This is how God feels, through a body. You may set that sentence down if it is too heavy or too much or not yours. The feeling does not need the sentence. It was here before the sentence, and it will be here after, and it asks nothing of you except one thing. Do not cover it so fast. The next time the quiet comes, and with it that faint, causeless ache, before you call it loneliness, before you call it lack, before you make it a problem with your name on it, let it be there, unnamed, for one breath. You do not have to do anything with it. That is the one thing it has been waiting your whole life for you to understand. Where it finds you. You will not find it. It is not the kind of thing that is found. But I can tell you where it finds you, and you will know every room. It finds you on the drive home after a good evening. The dinner went well, everyone laughed, nothing happened that needs a name. And somewhere between two exits, with the dark moving past the windows, it is there. Not heavy, not asking, riding with you. It finds you in the kitchen at 9:30. The children are asleep, the dishwasher is running its quiet program. By every measure that exists, you are fine. You stand there with a cloth in your hand and do not move for a moment, and could not say why. It finds you on a Sunday afternoon, in the gap where the weak structures fall away and evening has not yet come to rescue you. It finds you in the hotel room, in a city where no one knows you, when the door clicks shut and the silence introduces itself. It finds you in the moment after the guests have gone, the door closed, the glasses everywhere, the house suddenly only itself again. It finds you sometimes in the middle of your own celebration. You look across a room full of people who came for you, and for 2 seconds you are watching it all from somewhere very quiet and very far. And the feeling is there, soft as the noise is loud. Notice what these rooms have in common. Nothing is wrong in any of them. The feeling does not come when life fails. It comes when life pauses, when the doing stops, when no one is mirroring you, when the role hangs in the wardrobe and you are, briefly, no one in particular. It does not visit the wreckage, it visits the stillness. Remember that. It is not the first tell, and you will need the tells because of what your mind is about to do. Your mind cannot leave a feeling uncaused. It will reach for a name the way a hand reaches for a railing, and the names will come in an order I can give you in advance because it is everyone's order. I am just tired. But tired sleeps and wakes, and the feeling is still there, sitting on the edge of the rested morning. I am ungrateful. Look at everything I have. But you are not ungrateful. You can hold your whole life in your hands and give thanks for every piece of it, honestly, and the feeling does not move. It was never an accusation. Something is wrong between us. And now you are looking at the person sleeping next to you through the lens of a feeling that was never about them. Careful. Whole lives have been rearranged on this misreading. I think I might be depressed. Hold that one gently. It is the heaviest name, and sometimes it is the true one. And a few pages from now I will tell you how to know. But notice first that this feeling does not behave the way that word behaves. I need a change. The new job, the new city, the new person, the project, the purchase, the plan. You can spend 10 years inside this name. Many do. Hold each name up to the feeling like a key to a lock. None of them turn. That is how you will know. Not by what it is. It will not tell you what it is, but by what it refuses. It has no object. Look behind it, nothing. It does not respond to solving. Fix everything the names point to, and it is still there, patient, unimpressed. It rises in stillness and recedes in noise, which is backwards from every real problem you have ever had, and is exactly why you keep yourself so busy. And it does not contract you. Pain closes a body around itself. This opens. There is a thinning in it, a tenderness, as if the boundary between you and everything were one layer fewer than usual. No object, no solution, born in stillness, opening, not closing. 4 tells. You will not remember them in the moment, but afterward, on the motorway, in the kitchen, in the hotel room, one of them will surface. And you will say, oh. And the oh is the beginning of everything this book has to give you. Because the feeling was never the problem. The problem was the speed of the hand that reaches for the railing. When nothing is missing. There was a man who built his house. He built it the way you build one. A room at a time, for 20 years, the room of his work, the room of his marriage, the rooms of his children, one and then another. He furnished each one and moved to the next. And the building had a sound to it, a hum of forward motion, and the hum told him who he was. And one evening the last room was finished. He set the final thing in its place and sat down, and the house went quiet around him, and into the quiet came a feeling. And the man thought, there must be a room I have forgotten. So he went looking. He tore open a wall and built a gym behind it. He changed his work for newer work. He stood in the garden at night planning an extension, a move, a different life with different rooms. Some men find a whole second house in this season with someone new inside it and call the demolition love. He was not missing a room. He was, for the first time in 20 years, home, with nothing left to build. And he had never once sat in his own house without a hammer in his hand. This is the season the feeling chooses, and now you can see why. There was a current carrying you all those years. Call it drive, call it ambition, call it the list. It was the engine of becoming, and it was loud, and its loudness was a kind of company. Somewhere past 30, the list completes itself. The engine, having nothing left to build, goes quiet, and everyone mistakes the quiet for something dying. It is not something dying. Underneath the engine, there was always another current, older, quieter, the one that was moving you before you had the list, the one that gets you up in the mornings when there is no reason to get up. The engine was borrowed, the current is yours. I will come back to it before this book ends, because it has a better name than drive. There is an old word for all of it. The building, the list, the long work of finding yourself in what the world reflects back. The buried texts call it the works. Hold the word. I will need it again before the end. But here is what you must understand now. Because the feeling arrives when the building stops, because the feeling was always there underneath the hum. You did not acquire an ache at 35, you lost the noise. I will tell you something strange, and it is the closest thing to proof that I own. I sit sometimes with people who carry this feeling and call it by all the wrong names. They say sad. They say alone. They say, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I can feel it in the room, the same texture, the same thin place, the same weather, the very thing they are describing. I can feel it from where I sit. In them, it reads as suffering. In me, it reads as calm. Nothing about the feeling differs. I have checked. The way you check a coin against a coin, one feeling, two readings. The whole difference is residence. They are visited by a place I live in. So when I tell you, and I will only say this as a report, never a promise, that I am inside this feeling now, most hours of most days, and that from inside it reads as openness, as room, as a kind of unfurnished peace. I am not telling you what you will receive. Nothing arrives. I have not forgotten. I am only describing my address, so that when the feeling finds you in the kitchen at 9:30, some small part of you can know that what just touched you is a place where it is possible to live. The man in the house, by the way, is not a parable. He is every third person I meet. And for some years, he was me. The other weight. Now I draw the line I promised. And I want to draw it in the way you would draw it for someone you love. There is another weight. And it is not this one. It presses down. The one I have been describing does not press. This one presses all day, like weather that has moved into the body. It takes the colour out of things, the taste out of food, the point out of mornings, the warmth out of the faces you love most. It does not wait for stillness. The feeling in this book comes when life goes quiet. That one is there in the noise too. In the meeting, in the party, behind every face you manage to make. And it does not soften when you stop fighting. That is the surest mark. Soft sadness, left alone, becomes a place you can sit. The other weight, left alone, gets heavier. If that is what you are carrying, then hear me. This book is not the help you need. And I mean that without one grain of judgment, the way I would mean it if you had broken your leg and I had written a book about walking. There is a real help for that weight. People whose work it is, doors with their names on them, and going through one of those doors is not a failure of openness. It is openness. It may be the most open thing you ever do. And if you cannot tell which one you have, if you stand at the window with the feeling and honestly do not know whether it is the soft one or the heavy one, then do not decide alone. Ask someone whose work it is to know. Let them help you tell the wind from the weather. The book will still be here. It is patient. It was written by someone who learned slowly that the most loving sentence is sometimes not this, not now, not from me. And who is saying it to you here so that everything that follows can be said freely? The night you did not choose. The soft sadness comes quietly in the gaps, but sometimes the breaking is not quiet at all. Sometimes the floor does not soften, it gives way completely, and you fall through everything you were standing on, and there is no version of events left to hold. A diagnosis, a death, the end of a marriage you thought was the ground itself, the slow discovery that the life you built is not the life you are living. These do not ask permission. They do not wait for you to be ready. They take the certainty away, and they do not give you a new one to replace it. I learned this in a hospital on a ward over 6 weeks when a child of mine needed his heart repaired. I want to be honest about what that was because it is the most direct experience I have of the thing that John of the Cross is about to describe. Every time a nurse came in with a certain look or a doctor said, "Let's talk in a moment," the floor went out from under me, and instantly, before they had finished the sentence, I was building. The bad news, the worst news, the years of it, the funeral I had already half imagined. They had told me almost nothing. I had told myself everything. The terror did not come from what was happening most of the time. It came from my refusal to stand in the not yet knowing for even a second without feeling it. I could not leave the floor gone. I rebuilt it every few minutes out of catastrophe because a floor made of imagined disaster was still more bearable than no floor at all. Earlier still, when this same son was born and we learned he had Down syndrome, the floor went out in a different way. Not a fear of the future, but the collapse of a whole imagined one. And much of my grief in those first days, I see now, was grief for a story. A picture of his life and ours that I had been standing on without knowing it was only a picture. And when that picture finally fell away, what was underneath was not the catastrophe I had braced for. It was my son. The grief was real, but it was grief for the floor, not for the boy. The same boy, twice. Once for the future I had imagined for him, once for the future I feared for him. And underneath both collapses, both times, just him. When the certainty goes, every instinct says the same thing. Get the ground back. Find the explanation, the lesson, the silver lining, the plan. Close the wound with a story as fast as possible, because the open space where the story used to be is intolerable. We treat the loss of certainty as an emergency. We rush to rebuild the floor. More than 400 years ago, a Spanish friar named John of the Cross gave this falling a name. He called it the dark night of the soul. And he meant something far more precise than the way we use the phrase now. We say dark night to mean a bad time, a rough patch. He meant something almost the opposite of a bad time. He meant a necessary darkness, a night that was doing something. His claim was strange, and I think true. He said that when everything you relied on to feel close to God, every comfort, every certainty, every warm feeling that told you that you were on the right path, when all of it is stripped away and you are left in the dark with nothing, that darkness is not the absence of the thing you wanted. It is the thing you wanted arriving in the only form that could actually reach you. The light had become something you grasped, so it had to go dark, so that you would stop grasping. Listen to how he describes the soul setting out in that night. In my own rendering of his lines, one dark night, with my whole house finally stilled, I slipped out unseen. And he calls that outgoing into the dark with nothing, a piece of sheer grace. The house all stilled, the activity quiet. The usual lights go out. He goes out unseen, not performing, not mirrored, not confirmed by anything outside, into the dark. And he calls it grace. What John saw that almost no one wants to hear is that the darkness cannot be skipped. You do not get to the other side of it by understanding it, or by being patient with it, or by finding the lesson in it. Those are all ways of turning the light back on too soon. Ways of rebuilding the floor before the fall has finished doing its work. The night works precisely by not being resolved, by leaving you for a while with nothing to stand on and nothing to hold. This is the same refusal I made at the start of this movement, in a different key. I said that nothing comes to fill the silence. John would have understood that completely, except he would have added something I am not always able to add, which is that the nothing is itself the arrival. That the emptiness fully entered is not empty. Here is where he and I do not perfectly agree, and I'm going to leave out the disagreement standing rather than smooth it over, because it runs through the whole of this book, and I do not think it is mine to resolve. There was a younger version of me that believed what John believed, that the ache was a doorway, that if you went all the way into the abandonment and did not close, something on the far side would meet you, that the darkness was God arriving in disguise. I wrote that way once. I believed it. I am no longer sure. What I am sure of is the first half, the half John and I share without reservation, that the night cannot be rushed, that the rebuilding of the floor is the thing that keeps you on the surface of your own life, and that there is a kind of falling that is not destruction, but the only real way down to what is underneath. Whether something waits at the bottom, or whether the bottom is simply the bottom, and the grace is only that you stopped clawing at the walls. On that, the friar and I part ways. But we part ways having walked the same long corridor in the dark, and that is the thing I want you to take from this chapter, more than the resolution I cannot give you. 400 years ago, in a cell, by a different road, in a different language, with a faith I am not sure I share, a man arrived at the same narrow place, stood in the same stripped dark, and reported back that the way through was not to turn the lights on, but to let them stay out a little longer than you think you can bear. He did not choose the night. No one does. But he stopped fighting it. And in the stories that have come down about him, the man who wrote those lines was not grim. He was, by every account, unaccountably light, as though something about having lost the floor entirely had freed him from the lifelong work of defending it. Movement 2. The staying. The breaking sets you down in that bare, undecided space. It does not teach you how to remain there. That is a separate thing, and harder, because remaining cannot be forced. The forcing is just another way of leaving. This movement is about the people who found ways to stay, each by a different road, and about the disappointing and liberating truth of what staying actually gives you. The monk in the kitchen. After the dark friar, I want to introduce you to the most ordinary person in this book. He was a lay brother in the Carmelite monastery in Paris in the 1600s, and he worked in the kitchen. He had been a soldier and a footman before that, by his own account, clumsy, unremarkable, a man who broke things. He took the name Lawrence. He left no book. What we have are a few letters and the notes some visitors made of their conversations with him, published after he died. He would have been astonished that anyone remembered him at all. What those visitors found was a man who seemed to have something they did not, and who described it so simply that it was almost impossible to believe. He said he had stopped separating his life into the times when he was close to God and the times when he was not. The hour of prayer and the hour of washing dishes had become for him the same hour. He felt no nearer to what mattered, kneeling in the chapel, than he did with his hands in the greasy water, a dozen people shouting orders at him, the kitchen in its usual chaos. The noise, he said, did not move him further from the thing than the silence did. What is the chapel in the end? It is the arranged moment, the moment you have set up to feel a certain way, where the lighting and the silence and the ritual all conspire to produce closeness. And what Lawrence noticed is that the arranging is itself a kind of leaving. When you build the perfect conditions to feel present, you are no longer present, you are managing. You are decorating the gap instead of standing in it. The dishwasher, precisely because nothing about it is arranged, because there is no performance to give and no atmosphere to maintain, turns out to be as good a place as the altar. Better, maybe, because you are not tempted to perform there. I learned the same thing in my own small way in a coffee bar. I had my headphones in, good music playing, and I noticed after a while that the headphones were building a little sealed world around me, my own soundtrack. The room held at a comfortable distance. I was there and not there. So I took them out. I did not close my eyes or try to feel anything. I just let the room come back. A cup set down on a saucer, two strangers near the window talking about someone they both knew, the hiss of the machine, the low afternoon light across the floor. Nothing happened. And then, somewhere in the nothing, something settled. I had not added anything. I had removed one thin layer of separation, and what was already there was simply there. That is the whole of Lawrence's method, if you can call it a method. He did not reach for presence. He stopped covering it. And here is the part that matters most, the part that separates him from every technique you have ever been sold. He did not do it once and arrive. He did it 10,000 times. He lost it constantly. His mind wandered off into worry and planning and self-reproach the way every mind does. And every time he noticed, he simply turned back without drama, Without scolding himself, without treating the wandering as a failure, he called it a habitual silence, secret conversation of the soul with God, but the mechanics of it were almost nothing. Notice you have left, return. Notice you have left, return. Not once, not perfectly, for the rest of his life. This is the thing about staying that nobody tells you, because it does not sell. Staying is not a state you achieve and then occupy. It is not a plateau you climb to. It is a return you make over and over from a leaving that never fully stops. Lawrence was not a man who had stopped wandering. He was a man who had stopped being upset that he wandered, and had made the turning back so light, so free of self-punishment, that it cost him almost nothing to do it again. Hold on to his 5 words. Notice you have left. Return. In the next movement, I am going to put a practice into your hands, and when I do, you will find it is his only sentence slowed down and given a chair. For 10 years, he said, he had struggled. He had forced it, monitored himself, agonized over whether he was doing it right, which is to say, for 10 years, he had been gripping the very thing that can only be held loosely. And then, at some point, the gripping fell away. And what was left was not achievement, but ease, the same act he had been straining at, because something that had simply happened, the way breathing happens, once you stop trying to control the breath. He died, by every account, peaceful and unremarkable in the kitchen warmth of a life that from the outside had contained nothing at all. No one would have written about him for any other reason. He is in this book because he found it not in a cell or in a crisis, but at a sink, surrounded by noise, and because he proves that the way to stay there is not to hold on, but to keep gently coming back. The Emperor Who Drilled. There is a man who reached the same place by the opposite road from Lawrence, and he is worth a few pages because he shows that the road does not matter as much as we think. Marcus Aurelius ran the Roman Empire, and a long war he did not want, and at night in camps on the frontier he wrote notes to himself. Not for publication, for no one. Reminders, the same handful of truths returned to again and again because they would not stay put. We call the collection his Meditations, but the Greek means only to himself. Lawrence stayed by letting go. Marcus stayed by gripping at first. Where the monk softened, the emperor drilled. Be like the rock the waves break over. Tear out the impression. Confine yourself to the present. Quench the appetite. Keep the ruling part its own master. If you read these as a manual for becoming unshakable, you will mistake the book entirely, the way our whole age has mistaken it. Because a man who had mastered something would not need to write it down every morning. You do not remind yourself for 12 books of a thing that you have settled. The repetition is the tell. The most powerful man alive woke up each day and told himself not to be disturbed, which means each day he was disturbed. So his discipline was not serenity, it was bracing. It was a man building every dawn a structure to stand on, because he could not control whether his son lived or the war ended, and the open uncertainty of that was unbearable, even to an emperor. I have power over my mind, not over events. True. And also sometimes a wall he put up so he would not have to feel how little he controlled. Here is what makes him matter for this book, though. If you follow that discipline far enough, and he followed it for a lifetime, it arrives somewhere it did not intend to go. Late in the notes, the bracing simply stops. He is looking at a loaf of bread, at the way the crust splits open in the baking, the cracks the baker never meant, and he finds it beautiful. He is not commanding anything. He is not holding the line. He is just watching the world ripen and fall and finds grace in exactly the parts no one arranged. The general who spent 12 books ordering his own mind to hold is for a moment holding nothing. The effort, carried all the way, set itself down. And that is the thing the emperor proves that the monk cannot. You do not have to be gentle by temperament to arrive here. You can be a gripper, a bracer, a person who comes at everything by force, and if you bring enough honesty to the gripping, it will eventually exhaust its own hand and open. The discipline is not the enemy of the open moment. It is one of the long roads into it. It is scaffolding, the structure that holds you up while something underneath is being built, and that comes down when the building can finally stand. Not because it failed, but because it worked. And while we are with him, let me set down a law I have never seen written anywhere, though every age rediscovers it and sells it. Watch what the emperor drills. Return to the present. See each thing as if for the first time. Take the day as it is given. Now watch a person living from the open place with nothing defended. They are in the present because no story is pulling them out of it. Everything looks slightly new because nothing is pre-decided. The day arrives as given because no one is suing it for a different one. Do you see it? The drills are a portrait. Every discipline that works is a photograph of how an undefended person already functions, taken from outside, codified and taught back as instructions, the outputs of freedom, sold as its inputs. It is true of the emperor's drills and of nearly everything on the shelf today. The breathing courses teach the long exhale of a body that has stopped bracing. The gratitude lists imitate the thankfulness that arrives unforced on an ordinary morning. The presence techniques rehearse the attention of someone who has nothing to manage. None of it is false. All of it is the far shore, accurately described and sold as the crossing. Use the photographs. They are good photographs. The emperors kept him upright through a war. Only do not mistake holding the picture for standing in the place. The picture is scaffolding too. The danger, and Marcus shows this too in the same pages, is that the scaffolding can stop coming down. It can be reinforced, defended, mistaken for the building itself, until a man is no longer held up by his discipline, but walled inside it. The rock that was meant to be temporary turns permanent. The fortress becomes a cell, and the only way I have ever found to tell the two apart is this: what is genuinely holding you up does not need to be defended. What is walling you in does. Peace lets the scaffolding fall. Fear nails it down. The cloud. The Englishman would not sign his name. He wrote, sometime in the 14th century, a book of instruction for a young person learning to pray, and he wrote it in plain language. He did not put his name on it, and no one has ever discovered who he was. The book is called The Cloud of Unknowing. It is, I think, the most precise thing ever written about the place this book keeps circling. And it is precise in a way that others are not, because it does not describe the place. It describes the door and tells you the door is made of the very thing you are trying to get rid of. His instruction is almost impossible and completely simple. When you turn towards God, he says, you will find that you cannot think your way there. Every thought you have about God is not God. It is a thought. Every image, every concept, every satisfying idea of the thing, all of it stands between you and the thing. So those have to go. Not because thinking is bad, but because thinking is reaching, and what you are reaching for cannot be grasped, only entered. And when the thoughts go, what is left is not clarity. It is a cloud of not knowing, a darkness where you cannot see and cannot hold and cannot confirm that anything is there at all. Most people arriving at that cloud turn back because it feels like failure, like emptiness, like the absence of the very thing they came for. The anonymous author says, do not turn back. The cloud is not in your way. The cloud is the way. Stay in the not knowing and do not try to light it up with understanding. He had the nerve to walk into the not knowing deliberately, not driven there by a breaking like the friar, not stumbling into it at a sink like the monk, but choosing it on purpose as a practice, turning the unknowing again and again and refusing each time to close it with a concept. I did not learn this in prayer. I learned it, the little I have learned of it, in front of a decision I could not think my way through. It does not matter which one. There have been a few, the kind where the whole of your life seems to hinge on getting the answer right, and you lie awake running the arguments, building the case for this side and then the case for that one, certain that if you are only rigorous enough, the right answer will finally announce itself. It never did. The thinking just produces more thinking, and at some point, exhausted, I stopped, not because I had solved it, but because I had run out of road and sat in the not knowing with nothing decided. That was unbearable for about as long as I expected, and then, strangely, it was not. The answer, when it came, did not come as a conclusion. It came the way the right word sometimes arrives only after you have given up hunting for it, from underneath, on its own, in the quiet left when the searching stopped. The Englishman would have recognized that immediately. The cloud was not the thing in the way of the answer. The cloud was where the answer lived. What he asks is harder than it sounds, because the mind's reach for closure is subtle and it disguises itself as devotion. You think you are seeking God. You are actually seeking the feeling of God, the idea of God, the reassurance that you are getting somewhere. All of that is closing. The author's brutal gift is to take even those away. Leave the stillness, he says, in effect. Leave even your spiritual achievements, even the peace you came for, and stand in the dark with nothing. Which brings us before the hardest chapter, to the one who stayed when staying cost the most. The garden. There is one more place I want to take you before the hardest chapter, because it is the deepest instance of staying I know, and because it is the one that has held me the longest. On the last night of his life, in a garden, Jesus asked 3 friends to stay awake with him, and went a little farther on alone, and fell on the ground. The accounts do not tidy him up. He is afraid. He is, one of them says, sorrowful unto death. He asks plainly the way a frightened person asks, for it not to happen. Let this cup pass from me. There is no serenity here, no composure, none of the steadiness the emperor drilled for or the friar found at his sink. There is a man on the ground in the dark who knows what is coming and does not want it. And he does not leave. That is the whole of it. And it is almost unbearable to look at directly. Everything in him is asking for the open, terrible moment to close, for the cup to pass, for the night to be other than it is. He does not pretend otherwise. He does not reach for a story that would make it bearable, does not talk himself into the calm, does not numb it or rename it or flee it into the disciples' sleep. He stays in it fully and does not close it. The whole prayer survives. And it is worth hearing complete, because everyone remembers only half of it. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Two halves, nearly opposites, both at full strength, but the plea is real and is never taken back. He wants out and says so without shame. The surrender is total and costs everything, and between them stands one word, nevertheless, which does not cancel the wanting. It only refuses to make the wanting the condition of the staying. That word is the hardest thing anyone has ever done in the open place, to remain there, awake, wanting it gone, without forcing the moment shut, when every nerve is screaming to be anywhere else. One account says he prayed it 3 times, and that the second prayer had already changed. If it cannot pass unless I drink, your will be done. The surrender deepening between returns, even here, at the furthest edge of what a person can bear. It is the monk's small practice. Notice you have left? Return. Done in the dark, 3 times with the friends asleep. This is what the others, for all their depth, do not quite reach. Lawrence stayed in a warm kitchen. The Englishman chose his cloud and could not leave it. Marcus braced against a difficult day. None of them shows you the open moment at its furthest extremity, the place where staying is not a practice or a discipline, but the most costly thing a human being has ever done. The garden does. It is the open moment with the floor entirely gone and a man who keeps his feet in the nothing because something in him will not flee. I am not going to make a doctrine out of it. Others have done that, and it is not my work here. I only want you to see the shape of what he did, because it is the same shape as everything this book has been describing, carried to the end of what a person can bear. The unanswered prayer, the cup that does not pass, the friends who fall asleep, the silence that does not break, and a man who stays inside of it all, open, unarmored, not closing it into anything, and is met there, not by rescue, not by the cup passing, but by something that let him rise from the ground and walk towards what was coming. What met him is the thing I cannot name and will not pretend to. But I notice that it did not arrive to spare him. It arrived, if it arrived at all, in the staying itself, which is the last thing this book has to say, and the hardest, and we are finally ready to say it plainly. Nothing arrives. I told you this at the very beginning, before you could have believed it. Now you have walked with the friar, the monk, the emperor, the Englishman in the cloud, the man in the garden, and you can hear it. So I will say it once more plainly in the place where it can finally land. When you stay in the open place. When you do the thing that all these people in all their different ways are pointing at, when you do not close the gap, do not cover the soft sadness, do not reach for the meaning, do not turn the lights on in the cloud, nothing arrives. I mean this plainly. Not peace as a reward, not presence as a warm filling up of the empty space, not God arriving as a felt thing to answer the ache, not the secret recognition that the loneliness was love all along, or that the silence was speaking, or that the darkness was secretly full. The unanswered message stays unanswered. The silence stays silent. The soft sadness, if you let it stay, stays soft sad. I need to be blunt because almost everything written about these moments promises the opposite. And I have read it and I have written it. There is a whole literature of the breakthrough, the dark night that gives way to the dawn, the emptiness that turns out to be fulfilled, the ache that was a doorway. It is beautiful and it sells. And some of the people who wrote it were not lying. They reported what they found. But I have come to think that the promise, however sincere, quietly ruins the thing it describes. Because if something arrives, then staying becomes a strategy. You endure the not knowing in order to receive what is on the far side. You are not staying, you are waiting. And waiting is just leaving on a delay. The reach for closure, wearing the robe of patience. The promise of arrival turns the open moment back into a transaction. And the transaction is the very thing that was keeping you out of it. So I will not make the promise. And I want to be careful here because there is a version of nothing arrives that is just despair. And that is not what I mean. I do not mean that bare moment is empty and bleak and you should grit your teeth and bear its meaninglessness. I mean something stranger and quieter. I mean that nothing arrives because nothing needs to. The thing you were waiting to receive was never going to come into that space from somewhere else. It was the space itself. What was already there, before the story, before the meaning, before the reach, was never lacking anything. The sense of lack was manufactured by the reaching. When you stop reaching, you do not get filled. You discover you were not, in the bare fact of the moment, actually empty. The breath was already breathing. The room was already there. You were already here. Nothing arrives because nothing was missing. And the long ache of waiting for it to arrive was the only thing standing between you and what was always the case. I think of it sometimes like an itch you cannot place. You know the feeling. And your hand goes searching and you scratch here. No, lower, no, to the left. And nothing lands. And the not finding becomes its own small torment. And then, by accident, your hand passes over the exact spot. And there is that flood of relief. And the strange thought that follows, how did I not know where it was? It was your own back. It was never hidden. The searching was the only thing that made it seem far away. That is the closest I can get to what staying is like. Not finding something that was lost, stopping the search long enough to notice that the thing you were reaching for was never anywhere but here. And this is where I part from the friar, and I told you I would not hide it. John of the Cross would say yes, and that fullness that was always there is God, and the night was God teaching you to stop grasping at the light so you could finally have the one who was never absent. He may be right. I cannot follow him all the way, and I will not pretend to, because pretending would be exactly the reach for a satisfying closure that this whole book is trying to help you catch. What I can say, and what I am sure of, is the part we share. That you stop waiting for the arrival, and in the not waiting, the place you were standing in all along turns out to be enough. Whether you call what remains God, or the present, or nothing at all, it's a closing I am not going to leave open. Here is the instruction underneath every instruction I will give you. The one the entire next movement obeys or is worthless. Do not stay in order to get something. Stay because the leaving was costing you your life. That is all. The kingdom of heaven, someone said, is not what arrives after you stop leaving. It is what was there before you left. Movement 3. The practice. Every book I have written refused to give you a method, and the refusal was honest. Reaching for a practice is the same reaching the practice was meant to be quiet. I'm going to break that rule now, once, carefully. There is one tool to hand over, and this is the only place it can be given safely, after you know that nothing arrives. Hold it loosely. It is scaffolding, and scaffolding has one law. It must be willing to come down. You will know which kind you are holding by a single mark. What is holding you up does not need to be defended. The sitting. You do not have to go anywhere. That is the first thing, and the whole spirit of it. Every practice you've ever been offered begins with a journey, a posture to take, a place to reach, a state to produce. This one begins with the opposite. The feeling is already here. It has been running underneath your day like a fridge in a quiet house. You only hear it when everything else stops. You are not going to summon anything. You are going to stop drowning something out. So, a few times a day, close your eyes. Find the feeling that is already there. Not the loud ones on top, the residue of the meeting, the unfinished argument. Underneath those, the faint, causeless one, the thin place. You know it now. You have a name for it. And then, do nothing. I mean this with precision, because do nothing is the hardest instruction in the world, and the mind will immediately try to turn it into something. Do not name what you find. Do not solve it. Do not breathe at it in some special way. Do not lay a technique over it like a cloth over a bird cage. Just be in the room with it, the way you would sit with someone who does not want advice. The hand will reach. You will remember the railing, the names lining up, lonely, wrong, missing, tired. The hand reaching is not failure. It is the mind doing the only thing it knows. When you notice the fingers closing, open them. Come back to the bare feeling. That is the entire practice. The monk in the kitchen gave it to you already in 5 words that took him a lifetime. Notice you have left, return. You will leave 100 times in 2 meetings. Good. Each noticing is a repetition. The way each lift of a weight is a repetition. The leaving is not the interruption of the practice. The leaving is the material the practice is made of. A sitting in which you never wandered would teach you nothing. You would have been asleep with your eyes closed. 2 minutes is enough. The feeling does not require ceremony, and the kitchen will do. It has always done. Now the warning, and it is the only sophisticated thing in this chapter. After some days of this, someone new will arrive at the sitting, the one who is doing it well. You will notice yourself settling in with a small flourish, checking the quality of your stillness, comparing today's sit against yesterday's. That one, the good sitter, the quiet achiever, is the covering, regrown in finer cloth. The sheath does not give up. It learns tailoring. Do not fight him. Fighting him is more of him. Just see him, the way you saw the names. He is one more thing in the room. Even he can be sat with. And do not sit to get. I told you, nothing arrives, and I meant it inside this chapter most of all. The sitting is not a fishing line. The moment you are waiting for calm, for insight, for the breath I will tell you about before this movement ends, you have left again. Forward this time into a future where the sitting paid off. Notice that. Return. The sitting pays nothing. That is its entire value. 2 minutes a day in the one place where nothing is owed and nothing is earned. The residence. There was a woman who moved to a house by the sea. The first nights the sea kept her awake. It was enormous and it would not stop. She lay in the dark listening to something that had no off switch, and she thought, I have made a mistake. I cannot live inside this sound. She lives there still. Ask her now about the sound of the sea, and she will look at you for a moment, puzzled, as if you had to ask her about the sound of her own blood. She does not hear it anymore, no. She hears it always. It has gone underneath. It has become the floor of every other sound, the thing silence is made of there. And on the nights she travels inland, she cannot sleep. It is too quiet. Something is missing that she could not name if you asked her. The visitors still hear roaring. The resident hears home. This is the whole difference I have been trying to give you, and the sea is the closest I can come to it. The feeling in this book does not change. I told you, nothing arrives, nothing transforms. What changes is which side of the door you live on. Every practice culture treats places like this as places you visit. The morning sit, the retreat, the appointed hour, and then back to the padded life with the touching logged as progress. I am suggesting something else, and it is the most demanding and least dramatic instruction I own. Do not visit it. Move in. It is underneath everything anyway. Under the meeting, under the dinner, under the scrolling that exists to drown it. You are already living there. You are living there with your back turned. You met a man earlier in this book who built a house for 20 years and could never sit down in it. This is the sitting he never did. Moving in does not happen by intensity. It happens by frequency, without ceremony. Not one deep hour, but 40 shallow seconds taken in the middle of things, in the queue at the red light while the kettle climbs towards its boil. Turn towards the feeling, the way you would glance at a window. No posture, no announcement, and turn back to your life. The monk again. He had no chapel hours to spare. He had a sink. The sink was enough because the turning is small enough to fit inside anything. And here is what I can report about what followed for me. Report, not promise. I'm describing my address, not selling you a house. I did not notice the change while it was happening. The deepest changes leave no trace. There was no mourning when I crossed over. What happened was quieter and stranger. One day, inland, in some noisy, ordinary hour, I noticed that something was missing and realized it was the dread, the old flinch at the quiet. I tried to remember how the feeling used to feel back when it frightened me and found I could not quite do it. The way the woman cannot remember the roaring, not because I worked, but because I stayed in the house through enough nights, and the body, which is wiser about weather than the mind, stopped sounding the alarm about rain. I live by that sea now. People visit me there. They sit in my kitchen carrying the same sound and calling it sadness, and I feel it in the room, the same water, the same weight of it, and in them it is roaring. And in me, it is home. One sea, 2 ears. The whole difference is residence. You do not have to move in. The house is not going anywhere. It is the only house there is. But you should know that the dread you feel at its door is not information about the house. It is only information about how long you have been away. The orb. Sometimes the quiet is not empty. You close your eyes, you find the thin place, and something is already standing in it. The remark from dinner, still warm. The email you should have read at 10 at night. An old name with its old weight. The day leaves things in the open place, the way the tide leaves things on sand, and you cannot always sit as if the sand were bare. So here is the second practice for what the tide leaves. Begin with the small things. I will say why in a moment. Eyes closed, in the soft, open place. Let the thing that surfaced be there. Do not push it down to get back to your nice, clean sitting. The pushing is just covering with extra steps. Instead, give it shape. Let it gather into something you can hold, a ball, an orb, a weight in the palm of your hand. This sounds strange, and it is strange, and it works. And I cannot fully tell you why. The feeling which was everywhere, which was the whole sky a moment ago, consents to become a thing. Now hold it and turn it slowly, side to side, front to back, the way you would examine a stone from the beach. Keep your attention in the hand and in the feeling, not in the head. You will notice, and this is the strange precision of it, that it stings more in certain positions. Some angles of it catches the nerve and flares. Another angle is almost mild. Do not think about why. Thinking is the hand reaching for the railing again. Just turn it and feel it and let it be exactly as heavy as it is. You are not fixing it. Nothing about this is repair. You are doing something older and smaller. You are getting acquainted with the weight of it. And somewhere in the turning, without any insight announcing itself, a recognition settles into the body that no argument could have put there. It is a feeling. You are aware of it. That is all. And that is everything. A moment ago it was the sky. Now it is a stone in your hand, and you are the one holding it, and the sky is behind it, and the sky is you. This is the wide, open nerve, doing the one thing it was built for, recognizing what comes by, not as threat, as weather. The emperor knew this move. He just made it with the mind instead of the hand. The robe that ruled the world, he wrote to himself, is wool dyed in the blood of a shellfish. He picked up the things that towered over him and turned them until they were ordinary. You are doing the same with what towers inside you. Lay the thing bare, turn it in the light. Watch it become what it always was, a feeling in a hand in a quiet room. Practice on the small tide things, the remark, the email, the look you keep replaying. They are the training stones, and there are fresh ones daily. You will never lack material. And the heavy ones, the death, the ending, the wound that is still live, go towards those the way you would walk onto ice in early winter, briefly, lightly, ready to step back. Hold the heavy orb for a few breaths and no more. Set it down on purpose so that the setting down is yours too. And if it floods, if the holding makes it grow until it is holding you, if the weight will not become a thing but becomes the whole sky again and the sky is falling, stop. Open your eyes, stand up, touch something cold, say the name of the day out loud. You have not failed. You have learned something exact. This weight does not want a practice. It wants a person in the room. Take it to one. To the someone whose work it is, from the line I drew at the start. Some stones are not for one hand. That is not a flaw in you or in the stone. It is just the size of what you are carrying. And the most open thing you can do with it is not carry it alone. I am not telling you what the orb heals. I do not know what it heals. I am telling you what you will notice, that the things you turn in your hand stop turning you. The sigh. I have kept the smallest thing for last, and I have to hand it over carefully, because it is the kind of thing that dies of being aimed at. Sometimes, not often, never on schedule, in the middle of the sitting, or while the orb is turning, or at no special moment at all, standing at the window with the day going dim, a breath will come that you did not take. It is deeper than the others, and it does not belong to you. It is not drawn in, it falls in and falls out. And on the way out, something in the whole frame of the body settles, the way snow settles off a branch. A sigh, but with nothing sighed about. Relief, with nothing relieved. You will know when it comes, because you will notice you could not have done it on purpose. Try, and you will manufacture a deep breath, and a manufactured deep breath is to this what a posed photograph is to the way someone looks when they think no one is watching. I have a private name for it, and I will give you that too. I call it God's breath. The okay arriving from underneath. The body saying, in the only language it has, the thing the mind has never once managed to believe, it is already all right. Not it will be, it is. Already, all of it. I'm not asking you to take the name. Call it the body's amen. Call it the nervous system standing down. Call it nothing at all. The breath does not care what it is called. It was breathing you before you had names. You arrived on an in-breath you did not take. And you will leave on an out-breath you do not give back. And once in a long while, it surfaces in the middle of a life and lets itself be felt. But hear the warning inside the gift, because this is where everything in this movement could quietly rot. Do not sit for it. The moment the sitting becomes a net for the breath, the sitting is fishing again, waiting, wearing the robe of patience, and the breath does not land on fishermen. It cannot be earned, summoned, deserved, or scheduled. That is not a rule I am imposing. It is what grace means. The word was always a technical term, that which can only be received. So sit for nothing, live in the house, turn the stones, and once in a while you might get lucky. I will tell you something I have not told anyone, and then this movement is finished. It has been some time now since the breath last came to me. The sitting continues, the house is home, the calm is real and does not depend on it. But the breath itself, that falling in from nowhere, that yes through the whole body, has been quiet for a while. I miss it, actually. It felt like grace. And the missing does not worry me because I know what it is. You cannot miss what was never there. The missing is the proof, the shape of the visit, left in the air. Even the emperor who built his fortress every morning for 40 years was given his afternoon with the bread and the olives, and then it was a memory, and then it was morning again. The breath comes and goes and owes nothing, and that is what makes it the breath, and not a technique. That is the whole practice now, all of it. Sit with nothing owed, live there until the roaring is home, hold what the tide brings and set it down, and keep a window open for the breath. Not waiting at it, just open. Nothing else will be asked of you in this book. What is left is only what remains. Movement 4. What remains? If nothing arrives, then what is left? This is the question the last movement answers. Not with an idea, because the idea would be one more thing to reach for, but with a few plain things you already know in your body. What remains when you stop leaving is not a teaching. It is closer than that, and quieter, and it has been there the whole time. The breath that breathes itself. Stop reading for a moment and notice that you're breathing. You were already doing it. You did not start when I mentioned it. It was happening underneath this whole page, underneath your whole day, and with no help from it. And now that you are watching it, notice the strange thing that happens. It gets slightly awkward. You begin, just a little, to manage it, to do it on purpose. The breath that was breathing itself perfectly is now something you are supervising, and the supervision makes it worse. Now stop supervising. Let it go back to breathing you. That small movement, from managing the breath to letting it breathe you, is the whole of what remains in the one place where you can feel it directly, right now, without believing anything. You do not make the out-breath happen. You will allow it. The competence was never yours. It was always underneath, doing the thing better than your attention ever could. All that you can do is get out of the way, and the getting out of the way is not an action. It is the stopping of an action. This is what the monk found at his sink, and the emperor found over his bread, and the friar found in his dark, not a thing that arrived, a thing that had been running underneath the whole time, that became available the instant they stopped covering it with effort. Marcus had his own image for it, plainer than mine. Dig within. The spring of good is inside you, and it is always ready to flow if you keep digging. Not build a spring, not earn one. Dig down to the one that is already there, already flowing, waiting only for you to clear what you piled on top of it. You have felt this in other places if you look. The skill you learned so well, it now runs without you. The road you drove this morning, you cannot remember driving because the deeper competence took the wheel the moment you stopped gripping it. The sentence that comes out exactly right when you are not trying to be impressive. The moment with someone you love when you both stop performing and there is suddenly nothing between you. And neither of you did anything to make it happen except briefly stop. None of that arrived. It was disclosed. It was what was there when the managing stopped. Doing more, not less. There is a wrong turn here that I took for years, and I want to save you the trip. When you first understand that the reaching, the gripping, the effortful closing is the problem, the obvious conclusion is do less, want less, step back, fold your hands, stop striving, withdraw to a safe distance where nothing can pull you into the grip again. I tried, I called it peace. It was not peace. It was just a quieter, more spiritual way of leaving, holding myself back so carefully that nothing could move, mistaking numbness for stillness and withdrawal for depth. What remains, when it is real, does not make you do less. It changes where the doing comes from. You still do the work, you still raise the children, show up for the hard conversation, fight the war in the mud, if that is the life you are given. Marcus did not retire to a cave. He ran an empire to the end, in the cold. The friar did not stop praying. The monk did not stop washing dishes. What changed was not the amount of action. What changed was that the action stopped being a frantic reach for an outcome and became instead the simple doing of the thing in front of them, done fully, and then released, with no demand that life hand back a result in return. Because that is the other half of it, and it is the half that lets you actually live. Your effort is yours to give. The response of the world, whether the door opens, whether the other person is ready, whether the thing you planted comes up, moves on a timeline you did not set and cannot force. You can pour yourself completely into the part that is yours and have no claim at all on the part that is not. A tree grows trunk first, then branch, then bud, and only then the blossom. Each stage is the only true preparation for the next, and no amount of pulling on the bud makes the blossom come faster. The reaching that wants to force the world's response is the same reaching that closes the gap. When it loosens, you do not become passive. You become free to act fully without needing the act to be repaid. Do more then, not less. But let it come from trust instead of fear, and let go of the result the moment the work is done. The way a singer, at the height of his craft, pours everything into the note, and then, at the end, simply lets the breath go. The current. There is one more thing that remains, and it is the deepest of them, and I have been saving it. You met it briefly in the chapter about the man and his house, the engine, and what is underneath the engine. I want to give the underneath its proper name now, because you will need it on the mornings I am about to describe. There are mornings when the list is empty and the reasons are gone. Nothing is owed that day, nothing waits to be built. No one would notice for a while if you did not rise. Motivation, that loud, borrowed engine, has nothing to say on such mornings, because motivation only speaks the language of the gap. Do this, become that. Close the distance between you and the person you are supposed to be. When the distance is closed, or when you have stopped believing in it, the engine goes silent. And you get up anyway. Sit with that. Something raises you that has no reason. It has raised you through the grey winters and the hospital weeks. It raised the nurses on that ward through their 4th night shift. It has raised every person you have ever loved through days you never heard about. It is not willpower. Willpower is the engine straining. It is not hope. Hope has content, an outcome it wants. This has no content at all. It is just the forward motion of being alive, quiet, unreasoned, older than you. I call it the current. They tell me I come from apes, as if that settles it. It settles nothing. It only moves the astonishment back a step. Something has been refusing to stop for 4 billion years. It crossed oceans of dead chemistry and learned to burn. It has survived everything that has ever happened, without exception. It climbed through fin and lung and hand, not because it had a plan, but because stopping was the one thing it would not do. And this morning, with no reason on offer, it got you out of bed. Call the relay whatever you like. Evolution is a fine name for the relay. I am asking about the current in the wire. Here is why it belongs in the book. The Softsadness and the current are found in the same place. Both live underneath the engine. Both are only audible when the list goes quiet. Both were there before you had words, and both have been mistaken by you, by everyone, for something wrong. The ache is how the open place feels. The current is how it moves. They are the stillness and the motion of one thing, and you have met that thing many times in these pages without my naming it, and I am not going to name it now. But I will let an older voice come close. In a buried book found in the Egyptian desert, the disciples asked what the sign of the Father is in a person, and the answer given is 5 words long. It is movement and rest. Movement and rest. The current and the place where the work ends. I did not know that saying when I wrote in my first book that God is movement and stillness. 5 words, 16 centuries apart, neither knowing the other. I will not name what they are the sign of. The old text already did, long before I was ready to read it. They are coincidences I no longer file. What I will say is this. On the empty mornings, you do not need a reason, and you cannot stop searching for one. The search is just the engine trying to hire itself back. You need only notice that you are already rising. The current does not ask you to believe in it. It asks nothing at all. That is how you know it is from something else. You can start over today. Not because today is special, because today is the only place the current runs. The man who began these books is closer behind me than you might guess. And yet, he is a stranger to me now. He ended the first of them with 4 words I no longer have the certainty to write, and no longer have the doubt to delete. I will let him say them, and then we are nearly done. God is from today. The father who ran. There is an old story I keep returning to, and I want to end this movement with it, because it shows what remains better than any explanation I can give. A man has 2 sons. The younger asks for his inheritance early, an insult, essentially telling his father he wishes he were already dead, takes the money, leaves, and wastes all of it. When he has nothing left, when he is feeding pigs and envying them their food, he turns back towards home. Not nobly. He is rehearsing a speech, working out the explanation that will earn him a place as one of the servants. He is, in other words, reaching for the story that will close the unbearable openness of walking home with nothing. Here is a line I cannot get past. While the sun is still a long way off, before the speech, before the explanation, before anything has been settled or accounted for or made sense of, the father sees him and runs. He does not wait at the door with his arms crossed to hear the apology first. He does not require the story to be completed before he responds. He runs towards the open, unfinished, unexplained thing while it is still open. He throws his arms around a son who is still mid-rehearsal, still covered in the failure, still on the wrong side of any account that could be made of it. The embrace comes before the meaning. The love arrives in the gap, before it has been closed. That is what remains. Not a reward at the end of the road for the ones who stayed open long enough. Something that meets you right there, before you have made sense of anything, before you have earned it, while you are still a long way off with your inadequate speech half formed on your lips. I'm not going to tell you what to call the Father. You already know what this book will and will not claim. But I will say that the running, the not waiting for the story to close, is the truest picture I know of, the thing that is there when you stop leaving. The older son, by the way, could not go in. He stood outside the celebration, correct and unforgiven and full of his own accounting. I stayed, I did everything right, where is my reward? And his rightness was a wall he could never get over. He had a position. He had earned it. And the position kept him standing in the yard while the music played inside. Even that is in the story. Even the one who did everything right can miss it if he holds too hard to having been right. A note for the modern reader. This chapter exists because I know who you are. You are a modern person. Somewhere in this book, a voice in you has been asking politely and persistently, is any of this true? Or is it just beautiful? You would like before you give your quiet minutes to a feeling, to know whether the laboratories have anything to say. They do. I will tell you what they have found briefly in my own words, and then I will tell you where their map ends, because it ends, and the ending matters more than the map. Begin with the closing, the thing this whole book circles. For most of history, we assumed feelings were delivered whole, that loneliness arrived in you the way the weather arrives in a valley, complete with its name attached. The researchers who study emotion no longer believe this. They have found that the raw material of a feeling is almost nothing, a bodily signal, pleasant or unpleasant, quiet or loud. Everything else, the name, the cause, the story, the someone to blame, is assembled, built, in a fraction of a second by a brain that cannot tolerate an unexplained signal out of whatever concepts it has lying around. The feeling you experience as found was made. You have read this far. You know the assembly line personally. The scientists are describing the hand and the railing. And they have found why the hand is so fast. The brain, it turns out, is not primarily a thinking machine. It is a predicting machine, and its deepest job is to never be surprised, to lay a model over the world before the world arrives. It would rather be wrong than open. It will take a painful explanation over no explanation every time, because to the predicting machine, an unexplained signal is the emergency. I wrote near the start that we do not choose certainty because it is true, but because it is certain. I thought I had learned that in a hospital corridor. The laboratories learned it with instruments, and we are saying the same sentence. Now, the part that sounds like contradiction. Because you may have heard that the healthy thing is to name your feelings, that naming tames. It is true. The studies are good. Saying what you feel precisely calms the body. But look closely at what helps and what harms, because they are not the same act. What helps is naming the texture. This is faint, causeless, tender, here. What harms is supplying the cause. I feel this because I am alone, because something is wrong with my life. The first is what the researchers call granularity, and they have found that people with finer grained words for their inner weather suffer loss, cope better, come apart less. The second is the folder, so understand what this book has actually done. Softsadness is not a rebellion against the science of naming. It is the science of naming done properly. One more word where you had too few, precise enough to keep the cause out. Name the texture, refuse the story. The practice, too, has been in the trials for decades, wearing clinical clothes. The therapists found that most psychological suffering is not made of painful feelings, but of the running from them. They call it avoidance, and they have built whole treatments on its opposite, turning towards what you flee, staying, letting it be there without arguing. They found that people improve not when the feeling changes, but when the relationship to it changes. When you can watch a feeling as a thing in awareness rather than be it. They have careful words for that watching. You have held it in your hand and called it a stone, and the calm I report from living inside the feeling has the plainest name in their books. When a nervous system meets the same signal again and again and is never harmed, the alarm wears out. The signal remains, the siren retires, nothing arrives, something stops. The trials and the monks agree. Even the timing of your ache is on record. For years, the researchers measured life satisfaction across dozens of countries and kept finding the same curve, high in youth, sagging through the 30s and 40s, sagging precisely in the years where, by every outward measure, lives are fullest, then rising again toward age. They never fully agreed on why. You and I have spent a whole chapter on why. It is the season the building stops and the hum goes quiet. I will be honest about the edges, as I have tried to be everywhere. The curve has been shifting lately. The young are suffering earlier than they used to, for reasons that have their own books, so hold the pattern loosely. But at the heart of it stands. The ache that arrives when nothing is missing is not your private malfunction. It is so common it shows up in the statistic of nations. And the stillness. The brain scanners found that when you finally stop doing tasks, when the meeting ends and the phone is down and nothing demands you, the brain does not go quiet. A particular network wakes, the one that talks about you, to you, the self-narrating machinery. This is why the feeling waits for stillness. The stillness does not create it. The stillness only stops the noise that was covering what runs underneath. You have known this since the chapter about the fridge, the scrolling, the busyness, the filled calendar. The researchers would call it distraction. This book has called it covering. Your body has called it, for 30 years, necessary. They have even met the breath. The psychologists know the sigh, the involuntary deep intake and the long release that resets the lungs and settles the whole system, the one the body fires on its own beneath instruction. They can describe its mechanics beautifully. They cannot make it mean. That is not their failure. It is the border. So here is the border, drawn plainly, because this chapter would be dishonest without it. Everything in this book that is machinery, the laboratories confirm. The assembly of feeling, the speed of the hand, the cost of fleeing, the wearing out of alarms, the timing of the ache, the noise and the stillness. The door, the hinges, the hand that keeps pulling it shut, mapped, measured, repeated. About what stands in the doorway, the science is silent, properly silent. It is not a mechanism, and they do not study what they cannot measure. Whether the open place is just an open place or the friar was right about what fills it. No instrument will ever vote. The first half of this book's claim can be checked. The second half can only be sat with. One last thing, and it is the reason I almost did not write this chapter. There is a way to use everything. I have just told you as one more way of leaving. The feeling rises in the kitchen, the mind reaches, and now it has a new railing, the best one yet. That is just my brain, constructing a feeling from an unexplained signal, the folder in a lab coat. Explanation is also a way of leaving, the most respectable one ever invented. So take this chapter for the only thing it is for, so that the part of you that suspects something is wrong with you can finally stand down. Nothing is wrong with you. The machinery is standard issue. What you do in the half second after the machinery moves, that was never the science's question. It was always yours. The close. An old meal ends a story like this one. 4 verbs, in order. He took, he blessed, he broke, he gave. I have nothing left to teach you, but I can still set a table. Taken. I promised you a word back when the man was building his house. The works. It comes from a dialogue that spent 16 centuries in the ground, buried in a sealed jar in the Egyptian desert, dug up by accident within living memory. In it, the disciples keep asking the teacher about a place of rest. They want to see it, reach it, be told the way. And his answers keep circling one refusal. You cannot enter it carrying what you are carrying. As long as you are doing the works, you are not at rest. The works will not follow you in. 16 centuries in the earth. A text about rest, resting, until someone was ready to ask again. Here is what I think the works are, in the plainest words I have. The works are everything you do to find yourself in the mirror. The building of the house, the list, the career, the reputation, the being needed, the helping. Hear me, the helping too, mine above all. Every act whose secret wage is a reflection. See, there I am. That is me. I exist because it came back. None of this is sin. The works are how a self gets built, and a self must be built. You cannot set down what was never raised. The emperor did the works magnificently. The man in the house did them for 20 years. I did them in ink, a whole shelf of them. And the works were taken up the way the life itself was, handed to us. The diagnosis we did not order, the night we did not choose, the feeling that was following us the whole time, all of it given, all of it taken up with both hands, because what else does a person do with life? But the buried dialogue is right about the one thing our age cannot hear. There is an end to the works, not a failure, an end. A day when the mirror has nothing left to tell you, when being seen adds nothing, and being unseen takes nothing away. The list does not need you, the reflection does not feed you, the works fall still one by one, not abandoned, finished. And what is there when the finding yourself stops is what the disciples kept asking about and could not be told. The rest. Not sleep, not retirement. Rest the way this whole book has meant it. The open place, lived in, with no one left checking the mirror on the way past. You have heard it in other names. Come to me, all who labor. Labor, works, the same word, and I will give you rest. The Sabbath at the end of the making, the seventh day, was never about the calendar. I took up the works. They were good works. I do not disown a page of them, and they are finished, not because I grew tired, but because the man they were building is built, and the mirror has gone quiet, and there is nothing left in it that I need. What does a man do then with the work of his hands on his last evening at the table? He blesses it, he breaks it, he gives it away. Blessed. To bless something is only this, to say what it is out loud with love before letting go. So let me bless the works briefly, the way you raise the bread before you tear it. Blessed is the feeling that followed me my whole life, wearing wrong names, loneliness, lack, something missing, something wrong, and that turned out to be the open place itself, pressing through the thin parts of the covering. It was never the wound. It was the world getting through. Blessed is the night nobody chooses, the ward, the 6 weeks, the floor that kept going out, and blessed is my son, who has never once needed a mirror to know that he exists, and who has been, without trying and without knowing, the truest teacher in any of these pages. Blessed are the dead who kept me company, the friar in his cell, the monk at his sink, the emperor over his bread, the Englishman in his cloud, who would not even leave his name, witnesses across centuries that could not have conspired that this place is real, because everyone who stops running arrives at the same one. Blessed is the man in the garden who wanted it to pass and did not leave, and blessed is the practice, small as it is, 2 minutes, a stone, a window kept open. And blessed are you, reading this in the kitchen, on the train, in the bath with the door locked against the evening, you with your house nearly built and your engine going quiet, and that faint weather rising in the stillness, which you will now, at last, not be so quick to call by the wrong name. That is the blessing. That was the easy part. Now, the bread has to break. Broken. I have a confession to make, and it belongs here, at the breaking, because it only makes sense once everything else has been said. John Ferdinand is not the whole of my name. I did not write under it to hide exactly. I told myself it was the opposite, that taking a quieter name would get me out of the way, remove the interference of my own history and personality, let the thing I was pointing at come through cleanly without the distortion of who I happen to be. A clean channel, nothing of mine in the way of the water. I believed that, and there was something true in it. But somewhere in the writing of these books I began to notice that the careful name was doing the same thing on the page that the careful distance had always done in my life, the same move I made when I gave to people out of fear and called it generosity, the same move I made when I held myself back so nothing could move and called it peace. The name was one more thin layer of separation. One more pair of headphones, one more arranged chapel, one more way of being here and not being here at the same time. I had written an entire book about not covering the bare moment, and I had covered myself. I will go one layer further down, because a breaking should break all the way. Under the careful name there was a hole, a quiet, lifelong ache to be seen without having to ask for it. Because that is the trap of being seen. The moment you ask for it, it becomes a request, and a request can be declined. So I did what the hole taught me. I hid where I could be found. I wrote books and signed them with a veil, appearing whole on every page, while quietly hoping someone would notice what was underneath. Some of these books, the middle ones especially, the ones that sounded most free, were written by the whole in its very best handwriting. You remember the works? Everything you do to find yourself in the mirror? These pages were my mirror. You, reader, were my mirror. That is the confession inside the confession, and I make it without shame, because the whole is not a scandal. It is the most human thing in this book. Everyone is writing something and signing it with a veil, a career, a kindness, a carefully kept silence, and hoping to be found inside it without having to ask. That is the thing about the recognition that no one warns you of. It does not stay in the parts of your life you assign to it. It does not let you point at the gap from behind a screen forever. At some point, the pointing itself comes under the same light, and you see that the screen is the very thing you have been writing against, and that to be consistent, to actually do the thing instead of describing it, you have to come out from behind it. Not because hiding is wrong, because the love I kept describing, the one that runs towards the sun while he is still a long way off, the one that meets you before you have made yourself presentable, that love asks you to be there in the open, as yourself, without the careful name standing slightly in front of you. So this is me, stepping out from behind it. My name is Roy Ockers. It is good to meet you, this late and at last. And notice, now that you have it, how little it weighs. It was never about the name. The hiding was not the problem, and the unveiling is not the cure. Both were moves in the mirror game, and the game is over. So do not file me as an author. See me as a friend who shared something at the table, the way friends do. Not to be admired for it, and no longer even to be seen through it. Just sharing, because it was real and you were there. Not because I have arrived. I have not. I will close the gap again tomorrow morning, probably before I am even out of bed. I will reach for the story, cover the soft sadness, grip something to stand on, the way I have my whole life and the way the emperor did before me. Arriving was never the point. There is no morning where the leaving stops for good. There is only the noticing and the turning back and the willingness, once in a while, for a moment, to stay a heartbeat longer than you think you can. That is all any of them found. The friar in the dark, the monk at the sink, the emperor over his bread, the unnamed Englishman in his cloud. Not an arrival, a place that was always here. That they stopped, briefly, leaving. And the willingness to keep coming back to it, lightly, without the punishing for the rest of their lives. The bread breaks so it can be handed across the table. There was no other reason to break it. Given. Why do we talk? Someone once asked a philosopher why we sleep. He answered with a better question. Why are we awake? A tree is not awake. It does not need to be. Waking is expensive, and nature pays for nothing without reason. We wake to move, to find food, to find each other. Wakefulness is for something. So I ask it of speech. Why do we talk? Really? Not the warnings and the directions. Those are cheap and useful. The rest of it, the explaining, the positioning, the being interesting, the being right, the filling of every silence in every room as if silence were a leak in the boat. I can only answer for myself, and the answer took all of these books, and it has 3 flaws. The first, I talked because I was defending something. Every sentence I ever spoke had, somewhere in its cellar, a small lawyer arguing my existence. See me this way. Do not see me that way. Here is who I am. The works in their spoken form, language as mirror polish. Beneath the defending, the whole, the one I confessed at the breaking of the bread, talking is how the whole eats. Every page was a small flare sent up. Here, look, find me, without my asking. You cannot say one true word about silence from inside that. And for years I did exactly that, beautifully. And beneath both, the deepest flaw, the truest reason, the one I could only see once it was finished. I talked because I was working it out, thinking aloud, in ink. I did not write these books because I knew. I wrote them to find out whether I knew, whether the place was real, whether the feeling was what I thought it was, or whether I was a man alone in a room, imagining whether. Every chapter was a question, wearing the clothes of an answer. Why are we awake? Because something is unfinished. Why do we talk? The same. A creature talks while something in it is still unresolved. The talking was the resolving. And since we are at the table, one more honesty, so that no one ever has to discover it instead of being told. These books did not take a decade. They came in a single season, half a year, all of them, one held breath finally let out. The feeling is a lifetime old. The misreadings are a lifetime old. The wall took decades to build, meaning by meaning, story by story. But when a wall like that finally gives, the water does not pace itself. People will assume a shelf like this took half a life. It did. And it did not. Half a life to gather. One season to say. And even that is too tidy. The gathering was never a line. It was a room, and the writing only moved through it, and the books came fast because nothing had to be retrieved, nothing had ever left. And it is resolved. Not because an answer arrived, you know better than that by now, but because the question stopped. I checked the coin against the coin so many times that the checking fell still. I know the place now, the way you know the taste of water, not as a belief I could argue, but as an address. A man keeps talking while he is still finding out. I have found out. I can be quiet now. I know now. And as the three fell away, the defending, the whole, the question, slowly with no mourning to mark it, so did the need. Not the ability, the need. Words became what they should have been all along, optimal. A tool on the wall, not a pump running day and night against a leak that was never there. I believe the silence underneath speech is closer to the truth than any sentence ever spoken, including this one. Not an empty silence, the resident kind, the sea under the words. A person at rest does not need to talk the way a finished house does not need a hammer. And when such a person does speak, the words come out like a father running, before meaning, ahead of the accounting, with nothing to defend. And this is why I am going. And now you can hear it without mystery. The books were my works. The voice was the last of them. The most polished mirror I ever owned. A man who keeps explaining that the mirror is not needed is still holding the mirror. So I am setting it down. Where I am going, you cannot come. Not because it is far or hidden or above you, because it is not a destination at all. It is only what your own kitchen becomes when no one is narrating it. You cannot follow me there. You can only stop leaving where you are. Hear the difference one last time, because everything depends on it. I am leaving the position, not the people. The author goes, the man remains, at his table, in his town, carrying his children's shoes in from the rain, unrecorded. What you lose is the pointing finger. What you keep is everything it pointed at, which was never mine and was always yours. It does not worry me whether any of it lands. There is an old instruction for travellers. When you enter a house, let your peace rest on it. And if the house does not receive you, let your peace return to you. The buried dialogue says it too in its own way. Nothing offered in love can be lost. If what I have shared is received, it is yours. And if it is not, it goes back to the source, like rain that finds no ground, which does not disappear, but only returns to where it came from, whole. Either way, whole. I wrote in one of these very books about loving when nothing comes back, about offering loneliness itself as love at a table where no one seemed to be sitting. I understood the offering then. What I did not yet understand is that the offering is complete at the moment it is made. The work was always the only thing that was mine. The reception never was. Pour everything into the note and let the breath go. The table was empty. The source was sitting at it. And here is what is given. The last verb. The whole reason for the meal. The table is yours now. Not a church's. Not a book's. Every kitchen at 9:30 is the table. Every motorway after a good evening. Every Sunday afternoon. Every hotel room. Every house gone suddenly quiet around you. Altars. All of them. You have been standing at them your whole life, calling the sacrament a problem. So when the quiet comes, tonight, or Sunday, or in 20 years, on an evening I will never hear about, and that soft, causeless weather rises in you, do this. Nothing. Stay one breath before the names. Let it be there. Take, as the old words say. This is the body, yours, the world's, the whole undivided thing, broken open and handed to you in the only form a nerve can receive. You will not need to remember me. That is the mercy of how this works. The feeling does the remembering. It was following you before me, and it will follow you after, faithful as weather, free as grace, asking one thing ever. Do not cover it so fast. The works are finished. Now, the rest. Softsadness, How Openness Feels. A book by John Ferdinand. Sigh, A Note to Myself by John Ferdinand. June 25th, 2026. I find myself speaking less and less. Someone asks me about my son and nothing in me rises to answer. Not for lack of words, for too many, and any of them spoken would be a true thing that lies. I could say his heart is not settling, that he sleeps in pieces, that the oxygen runs all night like a small tide in the corner of the room. True, and they would carry away a boy made entirely of what is wrong with him. Or I could say the rest, his smiles, his laughter, which comes for no reason anyone can find, the small steps he keeps taking, slow and real and easy to miss, the soul of him, the one thing no sentence has ever fit, true also. And they would carry away a small saint I built to survive the chart. Both false, not because the facts are wrong, because a person is not a fact. The moment you choose which true thing to say, you have closed your hand around a river and caught the water in your palm, the whole of it. So I say nothing. The sentence forms, and I let it dissolve before it reaches the air. I no longer trust words. I feel, just before each one lands, the small amputation it performs. There is a fullness in what goes unsaid. The whole of him, the whole of a morning, left open instead of closed into one true thing and carried off. I have come to prefer it that way, to stay in the openness and let it be as large as it is. A visitor came while Miles slept. When he woke, we carried him down, still warm with it, into a room holding someone new. She leaned in with the bright face people save for children. He laughed and looked away. Ah, he's shy. And I felt it happen, the whole of it, in less than a second. She had met a laugh and a turned head and made them into a person. Not he looked away just now, a shy boy, a small statue, finished, that she could carry out of the house and keep on a shelf. She meant no harm. There was an opening in the moment, a child who did not run to her with his arms thrown wide, and a word is the quickest way to close one. Sigh closed it. The word was never for him. It was the kind we reach for when we do not know where to stand, as I have reached for 1,000 of my own. And is he shy? By afternoon he will be loud as weather. He turns from strangers and towards the ones he trusts with directedness that would undo you. Maybe he was shy, maybe he was tired or dazzled or simply unwilling to perform his arrival for someone 4 seconds old to him. I don't know. That is the honest answer, and no one wants it, because you cannot carry it home. So I said nothing, not against her. I did not mind that she spoke. Correcting her would have only set my own statue beside hers. I would rather stay quiet, standing there. It seemed the more beautiful thing. Some things grow smaller the instant they are named. Love, sometimes, is the refusal to make them smaller. I did not go quiet to step away from him. I brought him down. I set him in the middle of the room, fully seen, laughing and looking away, and I kept my mouth closed so that no sentence, not even a kind one, would close around him while she watched. The silence was not empty. It was the only thing in the house wide enough to hold all of him at once, without choosing. And that is the difference I feel now. A way of speaking that closes the thing. She did it, gently, without meaning to. And a way of standing beside something that leaves it, open, which asks for no words at all. I sense, in the breath before a sentence leaves, whether it will open the thing or shrink it. And when I cannot tell, I let it pass. He was there, loud, soft, whole, a boy standing in his own life, needing no one to say what he is in order to be it. He has never once required a sentence to be real. Once I would have reached for the words anyway, to shape the moment or to fill the quiet, because the quiet frightened me. Neither pull is here now. I sat at the foot of the stairs and no sentence came, and I did not go looking for it. At that moment I was like him, and with him, there, needing nothing said.